I stand for Islam. I stand for the people of Palestine.
هو جاي يدافع عن المسلمين.
I'm a nurse and I'm a pacifist.
هذا إنسان مسالم.
I've come here out of love for my human brothers. I'm a nurse. I saw them shooting women. I saw them shooting children. Have you ever heard a starving child cry? Have you ever heard an Arabic woman trying to breastfeed her flaccid child as it dies and her breasts are empty because she's been starved? Please. I can't explain to you the horror. I can't explain to you the smell of starving babies. Cold, where is your heart? Where is your heart? I tried to feed these children and they shot at me. For love, for humanity, for Islam, please stand with your Islamic brothers and sisters. They welcomed me into their heart. I paid to go there as a nurse. They beat me in the desert for feeding starving Islamic children. Where is your calm? Where is your heart? For the love of life and for the love of humanity. They're babies and women. The women are trying to feed their dying babies and their breasts are empty. Do you know what that smells like? Do you know what that sounds like? For humanity and for love, stand with your brothers and sisters in Palestine. I have never seen or experienced anything like it, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event, which is our No2Nato series. And of course, tonight we're going to be talking about a very hot topic, which is the March to Gaza. Now, we also have some great speakers tonight and some great guests, and we'll be introducing those in a moment. It's worth contemplating that the events in Palestine have been currently overshadowed recently by the events in Iran this past week. But the genocide in Palestine has not gone away, and the cynic in me tells me that it's not by chance that all of this is happening at a time when people really want us to focus on certain things and maybe not others. That's probably the soldier in me that wants to say that. Just on Tuesday morning in Khan Yunis, Israeli forces murdered 70 Palestinians for the crime of gathering for aid near an aid distribution point, which totally runs against anything that I would consider the rules of combat as a soldier, and I've spoken about that before. But then if we even look at the humanitarian element of that, it is nothing less than disgusting, really. March to Gaza is a movement that was set up to try and break the siege on Gaza, to help try through protest and diplomacy to bring about an end to genocide throughout Palestine. Now, we have a great panel of guests, as I said tonight, and you who know all about the March for Gaza and the right of and the plights of the Palestinians. Taby Khan is a humanitarian peace advocate who has been in close contact with the people on the ground on the march to Gaza. Crispin Flintoff, who is going to be one of our other guests, is an esteemed broadcaster and journalist who went to Egypt to report on the march. And Helen Sutcliffe is a Workers' Party Britain activist who participated in the march to Gaza. So let's start with Taby. Hello, Taby. Good evening. How are you? Okay?
I am. We're just really trying to coordinate the efforts on the ground in Egypt at the moment to safeguard all the delegates that are still there and retrieve them safe back home.
And of course, Taby, you'd expect the Egyptian authorities would have welcomed activists wanting to break the siege on Gaza with open arms. But that wasn't the case, though, was it? How were the activists received by the Egyptian authorities, Taby, when they entered the country? How were they received?
Sadly, they were met with absolute hostility. So, on the first day, when national delegates from all over the world started to enter Cairo, they were immediately met with brutality from the Egyptian authorities. There was no nice questioning. They were having their passports confiscated, specifically dual nationals who were of Arab origins and Arab ethnicities. So they were specifically targeted with harsh treatment. We had over 78 Algerians who were detained and deported. So on that first day, they also deported European nationals. The Egyptian authorities confiscated passports, herded them like animals into a very cramped, small detention room. There were over 50 people in one room with one toilet in a mixed environment. People were extremely distressed. They were sending videos of being, cramped with no food. They were not given water. They were incredibly hot with not much ventilation in that small environment. And obviously, it's a very, very stressful situation to be in. So people were having panic attacks. It was absolutely horrendous. The Egyptian authorities put out a statement that day saying that they welcome humanitarian efforts, they support the Palestinians, and they really want to facilitate aid getting into Israel. That is the statement they put out, saying also on the back of that, we need to request approvals, and no approvals were granted. However, we did follow the process that they outlined in terms of requesting approvals. About 2.5 months ago, all national delegates contacted their respective Egyptian embassies in their countries. Some of them were ignored, but countries like Spain, Belgium, Switzerland, Canada, they all met with their Egyptian ambassadors who were very warm, welcoming the idea. They encouraged that this is a really amazing humanitarian effort that Egypt also aligns with in terms of values, and that they would convey this to the Egyptian authorities in Egypt. And that is the process that they outlined for us to take in their statement that they made when everybody arrived at the airport. So to be met with such hostilities upon arrival was incredibly shocking. It just showed exactly where they stood and what their attitude was to people advocating for humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. This was not illegal whatsoever. Statements were already put out. It was made very clear that there will be no form of protest, no form of congregate mass mobilization without authority approval. So people were just coming as tourists to look around and wait until organizers negotiate with authorities. However, they didn't even allow them to come and be tourists to see that country, unfortunately.
Wow. And of course, Taby, tell us about what happened in Somalia.
So the next day, so on the first day, everybody was arriving into Cairo. Some people arrived the next day also. The aim of the march was for people to march in a symbolic action from Al Arish to Rafah gates, demanding from Israel that they end the blockade, end the siege, and allow the thousands of trucks of humanitarian aid in to be distributed by NGOs and the UN, who have a good network and system in place to do this. So what happened the next day was people started to make their way closer to that region of Egypt where the march would begin if negotiations were successful, because the aim was to negotiate with the authorities, who made no effort or put out any sort of communication, rejected any forms of open dialogue with negotiators. So if it was successful, so we were intending that we were going to continue negotiations and hoping this would be successful. Obviously, there are thousands of people already in Cairo, and therefore it makes sense for them to go somewhere a little bit closer to Al Arish, which is a little bit more north, near Alexandria side. So it makes sense for them to mobilize or just be around that area. So if we do have approval, then we can begin the march. So people started to individually make their ways towards Ismailia. At what used to be a toll, they were met with a checkpoint, which was really, really shocking to everybody. There were military vans, there were military personnel, there were military, there were police, there was heavy security everywhere. They stopped all internationals, regardless of nationality. They forced people out of their vehicles, confiscated their passports, confiscated their possessions. People were separated from their bags, which had all the money that they were going to use on the trip, because in Egypt, cash is how you get around. And they never were reunited with those items. So many people were out of pocket, stranded. So yeah, it was terrible. So thousands of people made their way to what they thought was going to be a safe crossing just to get locally into the area. Military personnel stopped them. It started to become increasingly more populated with military personnel as time progressed. The military kettled everybody in. So even if people were trying to leave, they couldn't leave. And therefore, people just sat down. It was incredibly hot. You can imagine Egypt in that region in the middle of summer. Many people were sunburned. People suffered heat strokes and were hospitalized. And this is not even mentioning the violence and brutality that ensued after. So there were people who were dressed in white thobes, who are paid thugs, and police in civilian clothing. They're called axemen. And they started to come into the sit-in where people were sitting down and physically attack them. They threw bottles filled with nails. They started throwing punches, kicking them, dragging them. And then after this, military came in and police came in and started dragging people forcefully onto the bus. There were elderly people with cuts and bruises everywhere. There were young people with concussions and head wounds from rocks being thrown at them. People were being dragged onto buses. They weren't even allowed with human dignity to leave the kettle and volunteer to go on peacefully. They were kettled in, violently attacked, and then dragged onto buses. There wasn't any communication of trying to do this in a nice, possible, peaceful, facilitated sort of way. The communication went out the window. Negotiation was not on the table. And people were brutalized. There was a European participant who had their rib cages broken and were taken to the airport and deported that day with all of their possessions gone. And that's not to mention so many passports that were confiscated of people, and they did not receive their passports. They had to contact their respective embassies, received a picture of a whole load of passports of different nationalities just dropped on the ground in the airport. When people were getting deported, they sent us a picture of this. So many people had missing luggage. It was just left at the roadside, which contained SIM cards and money, their clothing, other legal documents for them to travel. It was an absolute nightmare, and it's not even counting the psychological stress that these people have endured.
Absolutely, because it was contrary to what people expected, yeah? And I get that. And you've explained that the main people that were involved in the attacks were the police, the military, and these guys that you would describe as axemen. Are there any other people that you felt were also the perpetrators of what was going on?
There were a lot of infiltrators. So there was the Secret Service as well. So people went to the Ismailia checkpoint. They were detained. Many were dragged onto buses. When they were held by police, they took their phones, went through their phones, went through all of their messages, and it was quite a massive security risk. We don't know who was able to obtain information to get into groups so that they can monitor people. After this, we saw that people who were in Cairo were being rounded up by police also. They were being hunted down by authorities. There was Secret Service working to identify who are nationals and connected to the march to Gaza. They were coming to people's hotels, requesting them to come down. They're cooperating with hotel staff who were giving in the information to the authorities on who's present in the hotel, and they would just take them and deport them. So we know definitely the Secret Service was involved. And today, even, we saw another delegation saying that they were approached by Mossad agents. So this is a really high level of infiltration that has
Absolutely.
been, targeted to this humanitarian peace march. It quite clearly shows that Egypt's stance is to cooperate with Israel and implement their agenda. They're cooperating in finding out who all these humanitarian peace activists are in order to keep tabs on what they could do in the future, get them out of their country, and prevent them from doing any sort of Palestinian advocacy. None of this was a threat to the Egyptian regime. Nothing was targeted towards Egypt. It was quite clearly stated this is not a political march in any way, shape, or form. All the demands were being made on Israel. And the excuse was that obviously no authorization, but there was threat of regional war. But they are allowing Israeli settlers to cross through the Sinai Desert today, through tour buses, and evacuating Israeli settlers through, which is being coordinated by the Polish embassy. So that's just not true. It's not that it's off limit to Palestinian advocate internationals, but it's not off limit to settlers.
And of course, your story as it goes out, Taby, would naturally, if anyone wanted to do this in the future, that would be it was something that I have to consider. Of course, that then the impact of that experience is then broadcast and puts other people off from doing anything similar. I believe Alan is going to show us some footage involving the police and the protesters now. I believe we have some video footage, and then we can come back for some more questions, Taby, yeah?
Sure.
Free Palestine! Il y a d'autres manouches qui arrivent. Il y a les militaires, les gars. Il y a des militaires qui arrivent.
There's a gang with the white clothes that the police called. So they're entering the crowd to provoke the people, and they're throwing them stuff. And the police, of course, is protecting them. They're behind them, you can see.
The people united will never be divided. The people united will never. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. From the sea to the river. Palestine will be free. From the sea to the river. Palestine be forever. Palestine be forever. From the sea to the river. Palestine will be forever. From the les déplacez-les alors. Palestine! Free Palestine! Regardez, ils sont pas là.
Use that force on let Palestine speak for a long time.
So Taby, as well as passports, electronic devices being seized, we know that some activists were detained. And you've got some more comments, haven't you, on how you were met and the collaboration that you believe might have gone on. Just give us your perspective on that, please.
Yes, the Global March to Gaza was made of over 60 different countries participating worldwide. And the participants included many clinicians who had been to Gaza on medical aid missions. It included MPs, parliamentarians, and it also included Nelson Mandela's grandson. We were trying to open dialogue with the Egyptian authorities. They clearly stated that they are on the side of the Palestinians and advocate for their human rights and humanitarian aid. Then why did they meet us with such aggression? If they had valid reason regarding safety concerns for this march not proceeding, then wouldn't it have just made better sense to open dialogue with us and communicate that to us? We were very reasonable in reaching out to all of the embassies worldwide. We provided every opportunity for them to contact us. We had spokespeople who had put their contact details all over every single platform. There was every known possible way for them to reach out to us and open dialogue and just explain what their logic and reasoning was behind denying authorization. And let's be clear, we did not get any official denial of authorization. We were never actually told this is not authorized. In fact, we were led to believe that Egypt would be very open and positive to hosting us and allowing this to proceed based on the responses from the negotiations with respective ambassadors. So to come to the airport and be met with brutality, beating of civilians, confiscation of their passports, herding them into places like animals and deporting them, it was an absolute shock. And then to continue that line of behavior the next day at Ismailia with an escalation to actually hire paid locals and police in civilian clothing to instigate violence in order to frame that this is a hostile protest and it's causing issues in Egypt or problems or is a threat to national security is absolutely absurd and a very big insult. It's clear that they are playing a propaganda game. They are telling the world one thing in their statement, but their actions very, very clearly show another. We can clearly see whose side they stand on.
Absolutely, Taby. And those types of orders, I know from my experience, come from much higher up the chain of command. And equally, the British police use very similar tactics when it comes to crisis actors. So I totally get where you're coming from with that. Now, I understand that some of the campaigners and activists are still stranded in Egypt. Has the British Embassy and the ambassador been helpful at all? And what advice would you give to international citizens still stuck there based on your experience?
So we have had a meeting. We have people on the ground who have had a meeting with the British ambassador in Egypt. And the conclusion of that meeting was that they would be supportive of anybody who has come to Egypt as a tourist and try and advocate diplomacy for any detentions and release if they came as a tourist. They omitted any sort of mention if they came for activism or any sort of march or were arrested by the Egyptian authorities with suspicion of being associated to a march. So whilst it's very vague in their response is very, very vague, and it's actually not useful at all because obviously, if Egyptians authorities are rounding up British participants, it's because they are arresting them on suspicion of being associated to the Global March to Gaza, which they are framing as a threat to national security. And so if the arrest is on that basis, it's not because they're there for touristic purposes, whereby the embassy can then intervene. We have had a group of really amazing lawyers in Egypt and Cage in the UK who have actually provided legal support. And so far, we don't have any British nationals detained. We are aware of who is on the ground. There are some people who went without registering, so we're trying to establish who those people are. We're working very hard to provide support for people to return as soon as possible. We have put out communications that if anybody would like to return, we will provide financial support to book your return flight. So we are definitely doing everything that we can in order to get everybody back safely. There is no further actions from Global March to Gaza taking place in Egypt. And therefore, anybody who is there is engaging in touristic activities.
So Gabby, thanks a lot for that. It appears to me that the march to Gaza has been derailed. Are you aware of any other events that are going on in place of the march to Gaza, and how people might get involved in those?
So the Global March to Gaza, the Freedom Flotilla and the Summit was a coordinated effort to break the siege by air, land and sea. We knew very well that it would be obstructed by, actors working at the behest of Israel. We saw them deconstruct this coalition and coordinated effects systematically, first by the flotilla, then the Summit, which they stopped in Libya, and also the Global March to Gaza, which they didn't allow to proceed. The Summit is returning to Tunisia. They will be reconvening in Tunisia, and there is an opportunity to join them in solidarity in Tunisia. There is plans in place for an encampment outside the European Parliament in Brussels. There is going to be a vote in European Parliament to classify what is happening in Palestine as a genocide on the 19th of June. And so that encampment is a solidarity encampment in order to apply that pressure and show that people are in support of that classification. There is also going to be Global March to Gaza mobilizations in their respective countries. So many delegations have now gone back to their countries, and they are going to be participate in national demonstrations. So in the UK, there will be a national demo on the 21st of June, and there will be a health block. And right in front or behind that will be the Global March to Gaza block. Once we are finished with retrieving all of our participants out of Egypt, because this is a coordination task on its own, then we're going to consider doing a strategy for other action developments. But those are the three things that are happening at the moment. Tunisia, encampment in Brussels, and respective mobilizations.
Taby, thank you so much. And I would like to personally thank you for your courage, because in my experience, I've seen an awful lot of people talk about things, but the talk really doesn't amount to much. It's what we do that makes the difference. So thank you, Taby, for giving us your perspective tonight. It's been very, very useful.
No, thank you for having me. All respect goes to everybody who went there on the ground and all the other organizational leads who made this happen.
Yeah, spoken like a true leader, Taby. I'd now like to welcome our second guest, renowned journalist and commentator, Crispin Flintoff. Now, Crispin, let's see if we can... Yeah, there we go. We've got Crispin coming in right now. Hello, Crispin. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me to speak about what happened there.
Now we get some great speakers on this program, Crispin, and it's always good to hear from people that are in the moment and also have a lot of information to share with us that might not necessarily come from sources that people would get. Crispin, you were in Egypt reporting on the march to Gaza.
Yeah.
Taby, in the first half of the broadcast, she discussed the horrible details of how the police and their henchmen treated activists on the march. Can you tell us what you witnessed when you were out there and what you experienced yourself, please?
Well, it wasn't very pleasant. It was quite stressful, but it was also quite, with hindsight, it was a bit it was quite amusing because when we went out there, we all pretended we were tourists. It was a bit like The Great Escape when they're trying to get out. We were all pretending we didn't know each other. When we saw each other at the airport or when we were going through customs, we pretended we weren't carrying a sleeping bag and a mattress and all this stuff, and we're hiding these massive rucksacks behind us, pretending that they weren't anything to do with camping in the Sinai desert, and that we were just on tourism and we wanted to go and see the pyramids. And the first night, when I got through the customs at Cairo, then to get into Cairo, there were messages going around that the police were at all the hotels checking people out. And not knowing Arabic, I couldn't work out what they were doing when they were on the phone. They're like, you think they're saying something to someone about, oh, look, we've got one here, and So I was just thinking they've got us. We're going to be taken any minute. So it was like that. And then on the day when we went to try to get near to Rafah, the Ubers were like oversubscribed to this one place from Cairo. It was just so kind of like weird. They were saying everyone's taking this route here, and when we got in the car, we got through one checkpoint, and we were like talking about how we're going to have this fish from this town, and we're going to eat mangoes and stuff like that, because we got through one checkpoint, and then we got to the second one, and it was just no movement at all, and every tourist was having their passport taken, and the police were taking the mickey. I mean, they just took everyone's passports. And then they were like handing them out one after the other, naming people, saying, "Is that your passport?" And just sort of trying to demoralize us. But this is the thing that I think about that whole march to Gaza is I went there because I wanted to meet all the other people from across the world who were going. I wasn't intending, we could never have got aid into Rafah. There was no chance that was ever going to happen. But the idea of 3,000 people from over 50 countries all trying this thing was amazing. I thought, let's see if we can do that. And when the police stopped us, there was a kind of atmosphere of, it was like a celebration of our movement, because the Italians were singing Bella Ciao, the French were singing one of their revolutionary songs, the Belgians were doing something, the Swiss were there, the Canadians, they were all singing different stuff, chanting different stuff, and the atmosphere was like, we are a big movement across the world. How many people? I mean, how many people can afford to go all the way to Egypt and back, take a few days off, go to a desert? There are enough people there to prove that there's a massive movement across the world against what's going on in Gaza. And the cherry on the cake was I had a cameraman out there. He had a tiny camera because he couldn't bring a big kit. But he had this little camera, and he got this Welsh guy was talking just at the end of the day, knackered out, just pleading with the police to get through. And my cameraman took this film, and it's now been seen 30 million times on social media, which is as much as you get for any mainstream media. It's been seen that many times, and he's also even been asked on Piers Morgan. So that has definitely struck a chord with a lot of people. This guy's emotional response to what was going on in Gaza and how he wanted to help people has made a big impression. There's obviously people who are trying to ridicule him, but many people are seeing that this is not some kind of terrorist movement. This is people who have genuine human feelings of wishing to help others, and it's a positive thing. So I think that is a positive on it. The fact that we had all these people who gathered together shows the movement, and I think we can build from it. I think you have to try things, though. We've got a really difficult situation with Israel dominating all these countries with either their bribes, their compromat, or whatever it is, or their threats. And Israel and the United States are just dominating the Middle East, and most of those countries, obviously, other than Iran and Yemen, and we just have to try what we can. I don't think there's an easy answer to how we stop this genocide in Gaza. I mean, we've done so many different things, so many different initiatives, and there's a tendency of some people to put down anyone who tries a new thing, say, "Oh, it'll never work," but that's just not going to be the right way. We've got to be inventive, and people ridiculed Greta Thunberg, people ridiculing this Welsh guy. But
I mean, to be fair, Greta Thunberg, it's pretty obvious when Greta Thunberg does anything these days how orchestrated it is. And actually, I failed to take her seriously. I saw the footage of the Welsh guy. You could see it came from the heart. You could see it was real, and the environment that he was in was real. You know, some people have likened it to the stunt that Greta Thunberg pulled. She pulled a stunt. That was pretty obvious. The thing, would you say, Crispin, that this has benefited the Palestinian cause? And if so, why would you say that's the case?
I think it has benefited the cause because it's shown that the whole world is behind Gaza. It's shown that, and it's got through. It's leaked through the mainstream media. They can't not show that. And I also think, I mean, I've seen messages from people in Gaza and Palestine who've been impressed and moved by the fact that people bothered to do this. I mean, we have to keep their morale up as much as anything else. I can't say it's done anything to stop Israel, but it's helped us to keep going as a movement. We have to keep going. We've just got to keep plugging away. I mean, like I say, there's no magic answer to how we're going to stop Israel. That's the problem, really. I mean, just got to keep going.
No, I can get that. And of course, the March to Gaza activists, they weren't allowed through the barriers or the tolls or the blockades. But the video we've shown clearly shows the footage of a Maersk lorry getting through, heading towards Rafah. Is Egypt complicit in Palestinian genocide? And why is that only Yemen and Iran are standing up for Palestinians in the Arab world?
Well, I mean, I met some Egyptians out there, especially after it had happened. I met one guy who said he was on the protest for democracy in Egypt, and he hated the government. And there were so many people, he said, who hate the government and try to speak out against it, but they have no power. It seems that the leader, the military dictatorship of Egypt, I mean, is actually very hardline and clearly corrupted by either money or threats of some sort from the US and Israel. And I think that's the same with a lot of the countries around the Middle East. And the population are totally opposed to that leadership there. So I don't know really what the answer to that is, but we have exposed it. I mean, we have shown by trying that march, we've shown a lot of people now are looking up Egypt and thinking, why are they doing that? Why can't they let things through?
Yeah.
So I mean, we've got to educate people through actions as well. I mean, that's part of it. We have to show people that the reality is, because people say, why don't Egypt just sort them out? And then we're seeing why, and people are going to ask, you know, why? And then Israel will what's Israel going to say when they are asked, why isn't Egypt doing it? It's a very uncomfortable question for all those people to be facing.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we have the NATO summit that meets next week in The Hague. Some No2Nato activists are heading along to protest outside of it. Will you be heading over for that? And do you think that the protests, that those types of protests are likely to make a difference even in our countries in the West?
I mean, I haven't made any plans to go, but if my other half would allow me to go, then I would. But they are important because I'm just sick of these leaders who have no accountability, making decisions about war and our futures and other populations' futures without any consultation. And we have to call them out. And I think more and more people in the world are becoming aware that they're being dictated to by a false democracy, a load of countries who call themselves democratic. I mean, no one is. Why are we bombing? Why are we supporting the bombing of Iran? No one's voted for that. No one voted for supporting Israel, and no one voted really to start a war with Russia. So yeah, I think it's worth going out there and confronting those people when they go in there.
And from your perspective, Crispin, as well as protesting, are there any other mechanisms that you believe we can utilise to challenge corporate and political power? And you know, are elections an option from your perspective?
I think elections are very important because if you don't, we have a democracy in that we do elections in this country. That's what I mean by the democracy part. I don't know if it's a proper democracy, but we have an ability to stand candidates and who can put forward ideas and call out what's going on. I mean, the best thing that happened last year was George Galloway winning the by-election in Rochdale. And there was an opportunity from that time to build for the general election. But people tried to divide the opposition and undermine George Galloway and the Workers' Party. So that was missed. But I will never forget that speech he made where he said, this is for Gaza. And I think that shows the power of a by-election. I mean, Rishi Sunak coming out of number 10 the day after saying it's unacceptable that George Galloway has won a by-election. I mean, that just shows how it's important. And if people think elections aren't important, they're just not seeing the point of them and the purpose of them. But there are other reasons. There are other ways to make a difference. I think that the thing that we're missing at the moment is, I mean, it's actually being at the moment. If you look at Kneecap, now Kneecap are playing at Glastonbury, and they're desperately trying to. The Zionists are desperately trying to stop them because they will get a massive audience on not only at Glastonbury but on the TV, being educated about Palestine. We need to use more art and culture to put the message across because they can't suppress that as easily as they can people on news channels. I mean, if people are going to see a film or a play or hear a piece of music and it's telling them a message, then it's as good as anything you get on a news channel. People are turning off the mainstream, so they've just got to kind of be more inventive about it.
Crispin, thank you so much for your contributions tonight. I know it's been short and sweet, but essentially very, very important. So thank you for being with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
No worries. See you soon.
So it's really interesting, chatting to Crispin, and I'd like to thank Crispin and Taby. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to get Helen on because of a problem with her communications. But from my perspective, I've been involved in lots of different protests, things that I disagreed with. And people often say, oh, well, protests are a waste of time. But if they were that much of a waste of time, organisations such as the governments would not do their best to stop them. And of course, any person that's involved in anything that is about influence recognises that the two things that are fundamental to winning any situation are always going to be the strategies that you use and the momentum behind them. So from my perspective, what this march showed me was that you have lots of different countries giving a different message, and all of those messages will filter back through the social media, which will help create momentum. And I also believe that when people are squeezed enough, individually and personally, then they start to pay attention. And so I applaud Crispin, I applaud Taby because they were there on the ground. I've always been the type of person that would rather be there on the ground making a difference to create that momentum. And I can guarantee that based on some of the things that we're currently seeing and the way that these are getting out in the social media, it's only a matter of time before that momentum then has the capacity to influence some of these people that are right at the top, that are very easy to influence. Because if they weren't, they wouldn't be selling their souls to those that pay them for the deeds that they're carrying out on people that have no means of defending themselves. So that's my take on things as it stands. What I'd like to just remind people of is that we're actually doing a Prevent the World War III rally in London, in central London at Bolivar Hall at 1 p.m. on Saturday, the 28th of June, with none other than our George Galloway, Chris Williamson, and guests yet to be announced. Now, the tickets about the event are going to be posted in our chat, so you can come along and meet George himself. From my perspective, what I love about George's speeches is that he's possibly one of the only people that are showing you the big picture on the box, and it's all about Zionists and how they are trying to influence the world with their political agenda. When you see all these smaller elements of what's going on, it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. If you only see the individual pieces to a jigsaw puzzle, but you never see the picture on the box, you have no way of knowing where it's going. And I encourage anyone to take a look at what the Zionists are doing and to research what it is, what Zionism is about. Because from my perspective, they're pulling the strings at this moment in time.